do a
Howdy.
quick introduction.
Great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
My name's Bryan. I'm a Principal Technical Program Manager. I'm part of a team known as CAPE. No, we don't have them, but the CAPE team is the customer and partner ecosystem team. And really what our purpose is to be able to engage with large customers, handle all of the gnarliest type engagements that we have out there. In the realm of teams, we generally focus in what we call the CMD space, or the calling, meetings, and devices space. So that's probably why they decided to reach out to us for this wonderful thing about Teams Phone. Bob, I'll give it over to you for a quick little recap for you.
Yeah, thanks, Bryan. Bob, Wille, same team, same role as Bryan within the CAPE organization, working with many of our customers out there, maybe some of you out there. I don't know. I can't see you. Been at Microsoft a little over 8 years, I think, give or so, in similar roles. So happy to be here to see if we can answer any questions that you got. Thanks for having us.
Perfect. So guess what? It's starting to fill up. We already have a bunch of people throwing some questions in there. And I saw one that's an easy one that I know that we're already kind of working on. So if we can talk about it. So Bailey was asking about any updates on the native SMS for Teams Voice or Teams Phone.
Yeah, good old native SMS. Yeah, it is something that, if I recall correctly, is in private preview at the moment. And it is something that the team is working through. I don't have a date that I can officially give you because it is something that we are working through. And obviously, based on the way that we do releases are generally quality driven. So we make sure that we've got the quality markers down before we get this thing pushed out. And I want to say, Bob, is it US and Canada?
Yeah, I think the plan is we will have SMS support with calling plans in US and Canada, but to your point, there's no ETA for release. It's actively being worked on still. I think probably nothing else that we can share on this call at this time.
Perfect. All right. And then I think there was another one that we want to appreciate Rachel. She didn't even wait. She literally had questions even before we started the session today. So thank you, Rachel, for doing that. And this might be one of those that we may have to get more detail from Rachel. Let me expand this out here. So she was asking, appears to be some improvement in the syncing of contacts from TAC, Exchange, Outlook, but the sync time seems to non-exist and be random. This can be a major detriment to Teams as a phone service. Anything that we're doing to be able to help improve that process behind the scenes? If you guys know anything about that.
So I know we did make some improvements somewhat recently. I can't remember the exact timelines around improvements with changes in particular. So obviously we do a fair amount of caching of information. And so if you've got one that always pops up is like profile picture changes. You update your profile picture, but clients will show the old ones, et cetera. And we did a lot of work to reduce and improve that where it wouldn't take days or longer for those updates to make it through to the clients. Specific to like net new contacts or something along those lines, I'm not specific. I don't know if there'd be more details around exactly what's being seen in that question, Donald, but it's all obviously perf improvements in general are always things we're working on. So it's certainly possible that we made some other tweaks in that space recently, but to really know the specifics from that question, we probably need to dive into it a little bit. And if they're seeing very inconsistent behavior, I'd honestly probably push them towards a support case to see if something's going on.
Yeah, and I think I remembered seeing that we did make a major improvement where we had, I believe there was 2 different data sources behind the scenes that we were actually merging them to help out with that process a little bit. So I think that may be a factor in what's going on here too. But I think it's great. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that's another team that's actually managing those changes, correct, guys?
Yeah, so when you talk about the contacts being stored out of there's the Exchange side, and we have a people service team, for I don't know how many folks out there would know about it, but the internal side doesn't so much matter. But yes, there's other portions of our organizations that are responsible for some of that.
Correct. Okay, good. All right. Let us jump to another question. Looks like Rudd had asked questions about IP configuration profiles. they're can only set screen time up to an hour. Do you guys know of a way to be able to have the screen active all day during office hours? Some customer think the phones aren't working if they go black, is the question.
So the ask is to make a change to configuration profiles for the kind of like screensaver or screen, the turn it off display, but only tie that to business hours instead of a specific amount of time.
Exactly.
Yeah, interesting feedback. I'm not aware of if we're working on that one specifically, but it's a good piece of feedback that we could certainly take back to that team.
Okay, good. I had another one from Stefan, was asking questions wrapped around, is there an ETA on that multi-line capabilities? And I know that we brought out private line, but was it just a couple months ago or a few months ago as kind of that first step, right? So is there any thought, what's that process behind thinking about actual true multi-line when it comes to having multiple lines for a particular person associated at DoD?
Yeah, there's definitely work in this space. We don't have anything publicly announced, so we can't go into too much detail on it here. But rest assured that the team is well aware of the need and the desire for multi-line appearance. Again, not private line, but actual multi-line appearance. And they're working diligently to see how we can incorporate that in a way that's more straightforward and simplistic for us to leverage. So the team is definitely well aware of it. They're actively working on it, but I don't have any additional information I can share outside of that.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so speed dials, and I know this is a big one with a lot of my customers too. And I think we recently put out some information that, and I don't know how public that is, that we're going to be doing more with being able to do things in TAC to be able to push out speed dials. Can you guys talk about that just a little bit? Because we actually had a question talking around that org-wide speed dial capability.
Yeah, I believe this is in TAP. Maybe it's in a limited TAP right now. We can check on that, but it will be the ability from Teams Admin Center to create contacts or contact groups, speed dials, if you will, and then assign them to accounts so that they push out to your phone devices. So I have had many customers, obviously, over the years where this is a pain point of getting the contacts onto those phones, in particular, like common area or shared use phones, right? Where there's not an individual owner of those, and you want to get your in-house security numbers or front desk numbers or whatever it may be as your kind of core 2, 3, 4, however many speed dials you have on the phone. So definitely work in progress, and I think fairly close. That like I said, I'm pretty sure. I hope I'm not steering anyone wrong. If there's any of you in TAP out there, you can acknowledge it, but I'm pretty sure it's there, and we're just going through validation and making sure that we're not missing anything from a quality perspective, and then we'll progress it and get it shipped as soon as we can.
Perfect. Yeah, I know I have a few customers myself that like, oh, I see we talked about that on the roadmap, and they're like, oh yeah, this is going to be nice once we get that, and they've been asking for it for a while. So really appreciate that you're working on that and getting it out there. So there was another question wrapped around one of the earlier ones. We actually had a couple of people submit some questions ahead of time, talking about being able to have maybe just having Power BI templates. I know that's another group that kind of works on that from a user experience and side of things. But is there any possibility of being able to have Power BI to be able to create a more simplistic TAC information around your team's phone calls? Is there any talk about that? Is there something on the roadmap to be able to maybe bring some of that functionality in Teams Admin Center, just focus on maybe call record details, those types of things?
I'm not aware off the top of my head of a specific report in that regard. I mean, we do get asks quite a lot for a bunch of different slices that you can do inside of TAC itself and inside of reporting. Yep. That is a specific team that works on that, so we can certainly look to see if they're making progress in that space. I haven't heard of this specific type of ask though, Bob. I don't know if you were keyed into something along those lines.
Not as far as like an out of the box template. So I think there's kind of two approaches, right? We make reports available from Teams Admin Center for a bunch of different areas, including Teams phones. You have like your PSTN usage report, et cetera. So if you're using those and they're not fitting the need, they're obviously intended to be appropriate for the masses, right? It's a kind of single report that we ship for every single customer of ours. And then oftentimes we have customers that want more specific to them types of views and to customize that. And so I'm not aware of a specific Power BI template like to connect in, but the data is obviously available through things like Graph. You can get your usage data or call detail records, right? And so you can certainly pull that information in and build your custom views in Power BI or other tooling if you wanted to get that. I guess where we would probably need to refine it is the ask for us to provide more Power BI template like we did with the QER for a long time, and we've done with auto attendant and call queue historical reporting. We provide a template. It's a little more, hey, can you do something similar in the phone space that helps folks get started? If so, it's an interesting ask. We could certainly take it back and look at that.
Yeah, I think that might be what they're really asking for. So I think that's a good idea. All right, so let's just taking a look at some of the other ones we have right here. Oh, I think this is a good one from Dan. What life cycle refresh in mind, and with regards to Microsoft certification, what is the expected lifespan of a Teams phone device hardware? Obviously, we know that this is a tricky conversation only because of the fact that a lot of our Teams devices are built on Android OS, right? So there's a limited time factor. So I don't know if you guys want to kind of talk about some of those changes that are afoot, or kind of answer that specific question first, and then maybe some of the changes afoot.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't know if I'm the right person to comment specifically on our expected timeline. So I'll do the consulting thing and say it depends, right? But it's I think of it from you kind of nailed it, Donald. Like it's a little bit of a different story than legacy kind of desk phones were with traditional PBXs, in a sense that they are running, a mobile operating system, Android. We are kind of an evergreen service trying to keep things going. And so as we iterate and we produce new features and functionality and capabilities, there are limitations sometimes related to the operating system that's running on these devices and or the hardware underneath them that they just can't do it. And so we are certainly cognizant of that. We want to do our best to allow our customers to get the most return on their investment into these devices as possible. It clearly in periods, hasn't matched what maybe was historical, like a 7 to 10 year or even longer sometimes turnaround. Like we haven't been able to match that just with the pace of innovation and things like that. But it's certainly something we think about, and we want to make sure that our customers can continue to get value out of. But as far as like giving you a specific amount that we're expecting, I don't know if that's something I can provide. We might need to come from a different team. I don't know, Bryan, if you have any thoughts to add on that one.
Yeah, I mean, the only other things that I would add is we do publish as part of our certification program, the guidelines that we follow for the certification of devices, the longevity of said certification, and then the fact that and I actually had to look it up to get the verbiage right, because whenever you're talking legal mumbo jumbo, whatever, it actually talks about after certification end date, Microsoft is committed to make efforts to support the most recent version of the Teams client on such devices for 2 additional years following the end of the certification period. So it's a good idea to go and check. There's a whole list of devices that are out there on the Teams IP phone documentation page. It'll actually indicate the device, what its current end of certification date is. Again, you can then plan on generally 2 years after that for us to be able to continue to provide support. And that gives you kind of a rough idea of, life cycle of these devices, right? And kind of as Bob pointed out, it's not just, the Teams app. It's not just, the version of Android. It's the capability of the device, what the manufacturer is doing with firmware, things of that nature. So there's a lot of pieces that come into the discussion, which is why we kind of built the certification program, right, to kind of obfuscate that, nastiness, if you will, from end users per se. But this kind of gives you that guidepost to go with and say, well, if I have this particular device and its certification end date is 2026, I've got until 2028 as to what we're striving to. Again, I wouldn't necessarily plan to go to the end of 2028 because we say we're making efforts to support. That could be like you get the base of base and no new features kind of thing, but hey, it's still supported. Right. So still, a wise idea to see if your devices are coming up on end of certification date, it might be time to start looking at a refresh cycle for those.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Well, thank you for that. So one of the questions that we had previously before the session started that somebody submitted from Carl was specifically wrapped around configuration profiles or just ways to be able to push out speed dial. And I think that was one of the things, and the question was wrapped around graph or, really focusing, Carl, I think this is really meant for that mobile version of it, right? So make sure that speed dial is available out there. Any thoughts on that?
So, I think back to what we were talking about a little while ago, specifically for pushing speed dials out, we are working on bringing that in from a Teams Admin Center perspective. So you'll be able to create those contacts and assign them and have them go out.
Exactly.
From configuration profiles specifically, if you go out and look at graph, there is under the /teamwork/devices, endpoint, there's a number of 5 or 6 different kind of scenarios you can do. It's mostly gets. You can issue a restart. You can check for the pending commands. A few things. Get diagnostics. Get logs.
Yep.
We are always evaluating. Extending more capability set there. I don't think there's anything I can share as far as like an ETA that would say we're going to have set configuration profile as an endpoint coming in, H2 or something like that. But certainly it's something. There's a number of capabilities in the device management space that are being evaluated for future additions to graph. So if that is the direction you're looking at, certainly something we would want to do to continue to improve there. From a team, if it's with Teams Phone Mobile specifically, not so sure we would do anything different or unique there. That's usually going to be an actual person or user, and depending which, how they can manage their kind of context themselves. So not necessarily, I may be just missing something obvious with that ask, but if it would play into our plans or not.
Absolutely. Okay, good. I did want to ask about, and I think there's a lot of questions wrapped around voicemail, right? So one of the questions from Jeff was, is there going to be any improvement on the voicemail experience, specifically making it easier for groups to share and manage voicemails received? So it sounds like a more shared mailbox, almost like I hear this a lot with queues, right? So call queues, those types of things. Can you guys kind of talk about that a little bit as far as what we're looking at as far as that improvement?
Yeah, interesting thing about voicemail, I'll probably date myself here. I'm going on like 13, 14 years here at Microsoft and 25 plus years in the industry. So been there, done that on the voice side of things. Voicemail is always an interesting creature because even as of late, you have some instances where voicemail is just not even really a thing anymore. But then you have use cases like the call queues, the auto attendance, and so forth, where voicemail is actually a very important, aspect of it. The way that we handle voicemail today, we do have a dependency on Exchange for sourcing or storing, if you will, the voicemail environments. And that's typically where things get a little challenging for us as far as especially when it comes to shared voicemail access, things of that nature. Now, yes, we typically will run, say, M365 groups, as our backend for storage of voicemail. And because it's a group, you can open that group in Outlook. You can all see the voicemails, and it all works really well in the Outlook side of things. That next phase is for us to be able to pull that into the Teams side of the house. And there are some scenarios where we can do that a little more easily than others, things like voice-enabled channels, for example. But the Queues app is definitely one of those areas that we want to be able to bolster that type of experience.
Yep.
Again, we're not under NDA here, so I can't go too much more into detail, but know that it is something that the team is looking into, especially in the Queues app space, to be able to get this more holistic view of shared call history as well as shared voicemail.
and being able to manage that voicemail as it comes in, right? So I think that's really some of the things that have been touted with the Qs app. And if you guys are not audience-wise attendees, if you're not familiar with the Qs app, please reach out through the channel, reach out to your account team. We'll connect with you, the right people, to be able to get that information, because that might be the best way to be able to handle those types of scenarios. So, excellent.
We've got the YouTube video of the Qs app that we did.
Yep, we did.
So check out our YouTube channel. You'll see that. Do we have some general availability for the Qs app? I think it's later in the summer.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
I want to say it's in the August-ish timeframe, but it's definitely on its way from that perspective. Again, just as you go and look through the demos, things of that nature, this initial iteration of the Qs app, you will see, voicemail, you'll see missed calls, but it's not the fully baked shared experience that you might be looking for. I know in a number of customers that I've worked with in the past, what they're looking for is, if we have, a dozen of us that are in this call queue, we would be able to see all of the missed calls. We would be able to see all of the voicemails, and I would be able to even see if Bob was in the queue with me. Oh, if Bob answered that voicemail or was listening to that voicemail. So it's not just a dump of a repository of like, hey, here's 10 voicemails, but there's context, right, along with it, to be able to know, well, this agent is listening to that voicemail right now, so I don't need to pick it up because I know this other agent is working on it, and maybe they're going to make a call back so I can see that that's been followed through and things along those lines.
Agreed. Yeah. And Jeff, who was asking that question originally, was actually thinking not necessarily in the Qs app side of things, but I think that's still a good conversation to have. He was actually asking, wrapped around, for personal voicemail and that experience. Just because it seems to Jeff that maybe that's not a good experience in the personal side if there is a team voice. I don't know. I mean, I think the experience is good, but there may be some things missing from that side of things, especially if it's a shared scenario and not part of a call queue.
Yeah, and to me, again, I think it kind of comes back to, this is my own personal view. This is not the view of Microsoft or the product group or anything in general, is that voicemail at this stage is kind of just a last resort. Like at the very end of things just kind of land in voicemail, and that's kind of, it's almost where things go to die in a sense. It's so I don't, and Bob, love your thoughts on this too as well, but I haven't seen very many asks or even interest in bolstering up individual voicemail experiences, like being able to do fancy things in voicemail, different time of day routings and different this, and outside of the core basics of getting to your voicemail. I know we used to have things like Outlook voice access and play your voicemails. And I haven't seen a lot of interest in development in that particular space on the personal side.
Yeah, the voice access one comes up periodically. It's usually when it's a transition from a kind of a legacy style phone system, as you can dial in and have your voicemails played to you over the phone. But I have haven't had a lot of conversations on the personal voicemail side either.
And I will say I'm a terrible person to be the representative of that, because I may get a voicemail twice in 6 months. Just because of what I do. I don't fit that profile. So I'm not a great, litmus test for that, because I'm not the type of role that would get lots of inbound calls that would require that. So again, I don't want to project that Microsoft doesn't think it's important. It's, my use case, it's definitely not important to me, but I'm not the one that builds these things. So we'll definitely pass that information along.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we've got another question from Karthik. He asks about integrating third-party SIP services via the Microsoft SIP gateway, such as QSys AV products. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that and can speak to any of that. It might be fun.
I'm not familiar with that service directly. Go ahead, Bob. You're going to say it?
No, I was going to say the same. I mean, generally speaking, the way that all works with the SIP gateway is we identify, specific devices, makes, models, et cetera, and then we develop support for it, and we have to build that in to our backend, and then we release that information, and those can start working. I'm not I'm not familiar with the specific one you mentioned in the question. That team is always looking at extending support to more and more devices. So it's potential that they could be looking at something like that. But off the top of my head, I'm not familiar with that one.
Perfect. If you want to add some more context back into the QA, maybe we'll be able to pick that up a little bit further on. So
yeah, the only other piece that I would add to that would be the SIP gateway that we have. Think of that as that's a registration point. Like it's not built as an interop gateway. So it's not designed to be, hey, I'm going to take my Cisco solution over here that runs SIP and have it interconnect via SIP to the SIP gateway, and now we can pass calls between. That's not what the SIP gateway is intended to do by current design. It's designed to really be this entry point for registration of devices that run SIP, because you can't natively register a SIP endpoint into Teams because of authentication protocols and so on and so forth. So this is what gives us that layer of being able to have those devices register to the gateway, and then have the gateway be able to interface with Teams with all of the auth that we need and whatnot to allow those devices themselves to make and receive calls. But it's not really intended to be an interop style gateway. I again don't know if that was contextually what that type of solution is, or if this is just another make and model of phone device. Because if it's the latter, as Bob said, the team is always interested in expanding support where applicable for the SIP gateway.
And you might also speak to the OEM partner responsibility in that flow, right? While we have the SIP gateway side, right? It's also partners got to be willing to work with us.
That's true.
That was the voice of God, also known as Jeff. You probably didn't see him. Just letting you know, if you're wondering how we pulled that off. Jeff was not actually on screen, but that was him talking. So it's all good. I figured we might as well have some fun. That was not me. I almost wanted to do this, but I figured I better not. So anyway,
just not fast enough, Bryan.
Yeah, it's clear. That's good. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
I've got another one from my friend Antoine Butler. He is doing some Teams phone device testing, and here's the scenario. He has a phone in a conference room, okay? The logged on account represents the room resource in exchange that's assigned a Teams room basic license. And he's tried to sign this account as a Teams phone resource account with a number without success. So he's not able to do that and is at the right path. So I think we probably can give you some prescribed, we can send you some information, Antoine, on that. I can reach back out to you. But it seems like it is not successful for you.
Yeah, I don't know if I followed it all, Jonathan, but if it's an appropriately licensed account that can sign in, we should be able to assign a phone number to it. Are we talking calling plans? Are we talking, direct routing, et cetera? But on the surface, I'm not aware of something that would prevent that from what was described there. So.
Well, and I think part of it too, it looks like we're talking about Teams Room Basic license that's also involved with it, that does not have certain pieces like the Teams Phone standard piece. That kind of needs to have that, because the basic license does not include that.
Yeah, I guess part of my question in the scenario would be, if this is a phone device, why would it have a Teams Room license assigned to it, right? It should maybe have a common area phone license or something of that nature that, to your point on that, it has the requisite Teams Phone and calling plan or DR, whatever else you're using for it. I would just be wondering if because Teams Room devices are licenses are designed to go to Teams Rooms.
Exactly.
So maybe I'm just misinterpreting what kind of hardware it is. But if it is just an actual desk phone, or a conference phone or something of that nature, usually those would get assigned a different type of license and not necessarily a Teams Room Basic. But again, if you did assign Teams Room Basic, you could potentially layer on Teams Phone on top of that if you needed to. But I would want to know more about what that actually is before you go down the route of just clubbing licenses on that don't make sense.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I know there's some of my customers like, well, we still want to be able to see the calendar, or we still want to be able to see the join button, right? If it's a trio type scenario, right? But to that point, what is that scenario in more detail so that we can prescribe the right solution in that scenario. Absolutely.
Yeah. And we've got some back chat, and I think we found a solution already related to our friend Ella Wright, another amazing ConvergeComm resource. Talked about the resource account has to be a cloud. It's not the license. So we've got some misconfiguration here, and we'll be able to get Antoine his answer. All right. Thank you. What else, Don, do we have?
You know, I was looking at, there was this interesting one from Rudd that was kind of talking more about the contact center style thing. So let me ask the question, and then we can ask if we need some more detail on it. So he said, I noticed with multiple extend model contact centers, native teams integrated using Graph to be able to connect in, that things sometimes are a bit slow. Understand, is that realistically what he's trying to ask is, do we know if is it the Graph that's kind of causing some of those issues, or is it really reliability, and is it something that we're thinking about updating in the back end from a roadmap perspective? Or are you guys even aware of those issues?
I don't know of that issue off the top of my head, so it would be difficult for me to comment on like what could possibly be at play there. Yeah.
Okay. So support ticket, I think, is going to be the biggest one on that particular one, just because that then they could actually dig into the back end, see what's actually going on, and see if it is a Graph issue, or if it may even be from that third-party contact center. There might be an issue on that side. So, okay. All right. Are we doing, guys? Any other good questions? We have an internal person, Miguel, is asking, is collaborative calling going away and being replaced by the Q's app? I'm not familiar with the term collaborative calling, Miguel, if you want to put that into the, just so that, unless anybody on my team knows.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's see, Miguel, if you want to throw that into the Q&A, give us a little bit more details on that.
My guess on that would be that collaborative calling is the voice-enabled channels experience.
Yeah. Nope, I see what you're talking. Yeah, you're probably right.
That would be that's how I would connect the dots on that. And as it stands right now, voice-enabled channels are a thing. They're available. They fit a particular use case. The Q's app also fits a similar use case to what voice-enabled channels has, but has slightly different feature sets that are available to it. As far as it going away, there's no announcement of anything going away. But as you can see, the Q's app is what's coming in the not too distant future, and a lot of the innovations and whatnot that are happening are going to be moving in that direction. So,
agreed. Okay. Got an interesting one that just came through, maybe an easy one, but you guys, fortune telling, do you guys see custom ringtones being a thing?
I mean, I know we get a lot of asks for it. Recently, I feel like it's bubbled up again, more recently, and I don't know if it's things with like Teams Phone Mobile or other areas, but a bunch of asks to have different ringtones, distinct ringtones, more options available.
Yep.
I think it's obviously something we're considering. Nothing I can share, today about where that would sit in planning or any kind of timelines on what we would be doing with that. But yeah, it's definitely, it gets brought up a fair amount.
Okay. Good. Jonathan, do you see anything else you want to throw at him?
I love this one from Rudd again. Currently, voicemail for many customers is set to English. We'd like to create a voicemail policy to set all voicemails to Dutch. However, you can't set up just one language. You need to configure 2 languages in voicemail policy. Are you aware of this? So voicemail policies.
I remember this from, I don't know how long ago it was. I do remember this ask. I've pushed it into the back of my brain behind probably Copilot and a few other things. But I do recall that there was, from a policy perspective, that need to set 2 languages. And I don't know that there were any plans to make any changes in that space, but I know it is something that has been raised a few times. It seems like it's coming back up again. But I know I had that raised a while ago. I want to say maybe about 6 months ago or so. I remember getting something very similar to this.
Okay. Good. All right. So Rachel, who's started us off this morning or this afternoon, great question, and talking about that call history piece, but not necessarily the queues, but more personal, right? So is there any work being done to unify the visible call history between the desktop client and the mobile client, especially when a call is delivered via a call queue? Oh, that's interesting. So I guess it is a little bit of a call queue piece here. On the mobile client, the call history for a call-to-call queue appears as a direct dial call and does refer to the queue, but the desktop and browser give full details of the call. Seems same on Android OS, so maybe something a little bit different. Says they're using BT Operator Connect. But have you guys heard anything around that line as far as unifying that look as far as the call history on both?
Not specifically, but what I would guess here, and we can look into it a little bit, is obviously the real estate is different, right? But on your mobile device versus typically a desktop or web experience that you're on a PC, laptop, etc. And so sometimes we do have to make design choices around what we can display within that limited real estate, and you will see that reflected in various places within the client. I don't know for sure that is the explicit reason behind the difference you're seeing. It's not one that I'm super familiar with, but certainly something we could look into. But my sense would be that might be part of the reason that is doing that, is to make sure whatever data we're displaying, we're getting kind of an appropriate view for the format of the device. But I can't say 100%. Without being super familiar with the exact views that you're seeing there.
Absolutely. All right. Jonathan, do you have any other ones that you think would be good ones?
David Howard's question recently, after updating the Teams-enabled Yealink MP56 phones, the call transfer looks only to support consult transfer. We did a factory reset on the device to get the call transfer functionality. However, we would like to keep the phones updated. Is there a link that shows the recent changes to the Teams phone devices? I think we've got that. That should be in the docs. How to learn, on what?
So there's a support.office.com article that usually after all of these releases has kind of the end user facing changes to any of the specific devices that come with either an app update or a bundled update, as well as then there's usually a learn.microsoft.com article as well for the kind of admin side of the house to look at. That seems interesting. I'm not aware of intentionally removing the straight console or the straight transfer option, and if it's only on that specific device, I'm not sure. But I would
support ticket with Yealink.
Yeah, for sure. Yep, I would say yes.
I do notice in looking at that link that Bob was talking about, we did mention with the July 16th update, a couple days ago that just came out, we do have a bullet in there on call transfer improvements. And I recall, what we were doing in that space was better handling of lists of speed dials to transfer, things of that nature. So it's possible that that's maybe where the confusion lies with that particular update, and maybe it's just not as evident that we can still do blind transfers as opposed to consult transfers. But because if you factory reset it, my guess is it's going back to a version prior to July 16th, and you're getting the older behavior. But yeah, I would definitely take a look at that page and see if there's something that calls out what you're seeing there or what your experience is there. And then if not, and it doesn't align to that, then yeah, let's get a support case going. Let's get Yealink involved, especially if it's, like you say, it's only happening to those devices.
Yeah, that's a good plan. Okay. Thank you, David. Great question. Appreciate that.
Good question.
Bryan.
Yeah, and I just posted that link to that page just so you guys have that handy, just so you can keep an update on that. That is, anytime we do any app updates, that gets updated to the new changes. And specifically, there will be a call out for these are for Yealink, or these are for Poly, or these are for whatever types of phone too, if that's the case.
Yeah.
So, all right. Looks like Troy, we had another good question. Having the ability to give a resource name a friendly name to show users who's calling would be good as a standard naming nomenclature. Is any thoughts wrapped around that? Any idea if that's something that may be happening?
So is this a resource account for like an auto attendant or call
I would
queue?
say probably resource, yeah, for auto attendant or call queue.
Have a different field used besides the display name for those accounts?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Troy, if you want to add to that, please. And we'll move on to another question and come back to that if he adds something else. All right. Jonathan, anything on your end that you think?
Anything? Other plans to consolidate non-NDA teams' phone and or TAC roadmap feature dates to a single site and space. Well, everything is out on our Office 365 roadmap, so I think that will stay there. But you could just check that daily, right? Not much.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know of any like plan to have a slicer in there of like, hey, I just want to see like Teams phony stuff. It's basically if it's been publicly disclosed, it's on that M365 roadmap site.
Yep.
The part of the challenge with the way that we do things inside of Microsoft is not every feature that we develop gets put on the public roadmap. Right? There are features that will come out that never make it to the public roadmap. They simply get launched. We update docs, we make posts, we do MC posts, we do all those fun things, but they may not make the roadmap. Not every single feature that we do lands on the public roadmap, but usually the heavy hitter ones are the ones that land on the roadmap. And by heavy hitter, I mean, big functional changes, things that might require some admin prep, some change management for users, things of that nature. Those will typically land on the roadmap, but smaller improvements may not land on our public roadmap.
I think that's a good point. I think we want to make sure that everybody understands that not everything's gonna show up there. So
yeah, and I think keeping your eye on the message center, right, is real important. And I think you can do a bunch of cool things into it from a team into the message center, and just getting things that are related to Microsoft Teams, perhaps, like rather than getting everything from the message center, you can query that and just get what you're looking for. So
yeah. I have an interesting one, and we're going to actually use another term that seems to be a Microsoft favorite term at this point, Copilot. So put your Copilot hats. I didn't think so. So Gary is wondering specifically is there any talk, if you even think about it, possibility about being able to use Copilot to be able to build auto attendants and go down that route, so that you don't have to go through all that process of building those out, and you can give it a little bit more detail. Hey, could you build it for this? Is there any thoughts wrapped around that? Because I obviously know that it's future. It's not even on any roadmap at all, but thinking of big picture.
Yes, there are thoughts.
Okay. That's all I needed. I mean, literally, that's all we can say, because it's NDA. It's not even being thought through 100%, but we're just going to put it at that, guys. So yes, that's it. It was probably one of the easier questions you got. All right. All right. JW, what is next?
Looking. Other questions.
Oh, somebody has actually. So Rudd seems to be throwing a lot of the good questions out here. So this is in regards to the change in user management in creating resource accounts. If you gentlemen are familiar with that one, yeah.
I'm surprised we got this far into the meeting.
I know. I was like, why isn't this not?
Yes.
So Rudd's not very happy with it, as you could probably see. Is understand any rationale why this we went down this route, specifically for people who don't know about this, the ability for Teams admins do not have the ability to be able to create resource accounts, and they have to then go to somebody else who has that right and capability in Azure specifically to be able to make those changes. Thoughts?
I don't know that there's much that we can say around the why side of it. We are well aware of the feedback. I haven't yet met very many customers that are happy with it. I don't know, Bob, if you were going to come off mute there, if you wanted to.
I understand the frustration with the change. It makes that model of deployment more difficult for a subset of our customers out there, for sure. It's not obviously a decision we're making to cause that, so keep that in mind when you think about it. We are constantly reviewing how different things work in our service, and always looking to make improvements for various reasons, not whether it's functionality, whether it's security, whether it's performance, whether it's so on and so forth. This was one that was deemed we need to make going forward, and so had to communicate that out. I think we did update the timing. Now it's targeted for September. I'm pretty sure we updated the communications with that as well, that's when we're looking to have it done. But we've heard the feedback loud and clear. Keep sharing it, obviously, and we'll continue to look at ways to improve those flows in the future where we can. But right now, that's the direction that we have to go.
Perfect. By the way, Troy did get back to us, and that was that the naming convention one. He said, we use a nomenclature for staff to find resource accounts easier in TAC. When callers see this nomenclature example, everything with underscores, right? So CF underscore team name underscore location gets confusing. Being ability to say this company 800 number is easier to read if that's the case. So thinking, wonder it's almost like a caller ID type scenario there.
Yeah, no, I can see it. It's an interesting ask, because if you want to use the actual display name for more of a management standpoint, but you want to have end user facing display name that is different and a little more friendly, could we theoretically use a different attribute or a different field of some kind on those that says this is how it's displayed in a caller ID or lookup scenario from the clients, but if you're doing administration with it, this full name will also return it. Interesting, but yeah, nothing. I'm not aware of an ask before that today to look into something like that. But interesting scenario. We have usually for the Microsoft folks on. You go search around for our audio attendants. It's always interesting. The formatting of all of this.
A little decoder ring to figure out what the heck is that.
Exactly,
thing. So,
it is for sure. Oh, especially here, yes. I want to answer this one because she does a great job with a lot of the stuff that we talk about in general. So Tracy is asking a question. Didn't Avaya phones get certified as SIP gateway phones a while ago? I don't see them listed certified. Any idea what's going on with the Avaya devices?
I thought we certified a couple of the J series ones.
Yeah.
Are they not? They're not on the public page, Tracy?
But we're all looking quickly.
I know.
Last time we checked. We have a doc at the J series, but we don't have it listed as official.
Oh,
interesting.
That is definitely going to be a follow-up on that one, Tracy.
Yeah, we should follow up and make sure. I mean, assuming nothing changed there, we should get that article updated for sure.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. All right.
We have a minute.
We have a minute, but I think we've tapped these guys out. I don't know. There was a lot of great questions in here, and I think we got to a good majority of them. Yes, there's a couple of them sitting out here, but unfortunately, we only have so much time, and these guys are definitely busy. So, number one, I want to thank both Bryan and Bob for their time today. If you guys can give them a round of applause, that would be awesome.
Thank you.
A lot of great questions. So thank you. So I will take you guys off and we'll finish up with our session today.
All right. Thanks all.
All right.
Thank you.
Just before I go, I'll give one last update on the Avaya thing. I did find a thread. It looks like it's still going through QA with Avaya, and they said in the July-ish timeframe. So we're probably very close to GA. So there you go.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
There you go. Can't have that. Leave that item.
That's a nice. Yeah, we can't have that hanging over our heads. So
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
So thanks everybody.
Thanks, Bryan. Thanks, Bob.